U.S. forces intercept and dismantle a cartel convoy laden with industrial drug precursors. September 12, 2025. Beneath the desert sun outside El Paso, a high-risk operation targets a transnational network accused of drug, arms, and human trafficking. The target was a heavily armed convoy that had crossed the border, dozens of armored trucks guarded by over 100 mercenaries with rotary guns capable of devastating close-range targets. Inside were over 1,000 chemical drums containing hundreds of thousands of pounds of benzyl alcohol and hundreds of thousands of pounds of n-methylformamide, precursors that move vast value on the black market. Worse, their destination was a fortified compound just 7 miles from civilian neighborhoods, where more than 100 women and children were reportedly held captive. For years, this network had prospered on violence, linked to murders, forced labor camps, and trafficking that spilled from Mexico into U.S. cities. But that morning, a nightmare confronted U.S. commanders. How could special operators dismantle a hardened stronghold full of hired fighters while preserving every innocent life inside? Could they breach the compound's formidable defenses without triggering catastrophe? Here is what unfolded. September 4, 2025, 07:45 a.m. The quiet desert outside El Paso, just 15 miles from the border, was shattered by a sight that should never have reached American soil. A convoy of armored vehicles, dozens moving in tight formation, cut across the highway like a herd of steel beasts. In their holds lay a deadly cargo, over 1,000 barrels of industrial chemicals. Taken together, they amounted to hundreds of thousands of pounds of benzyl alcohol and hundreds of thousands of pounds of n-methylformamide, materials that could fuel large-scale production of illicit substances or be misused in other harmful ways. Guarding the convoy was a band of hired fighters, veterans of foreign conflicts, armed to the teeth. On the roofs of many trucks, rotary weapons snarled, able to rain heavy fire. These were not simple smugglers, they were predators, trained, hardened, and willing to kill without hesitation. To them, the convoy was untouchable, a moving fortress that no one would dare confront. But high above, unseen, reconnaissance drones tracked every move, every heartbeat of the formation. Washington knew what was heading toward American towns and what waited at the convoy's destination. A heavily fortified compound near the border reportedly held women and children as hostages. From operational headquarters, the chairman conveyed a blunt warning. If the convoy reached that site, the human cost could be measured in thousands. We could not allow the cargo and fighters to vanish into concrete and steel. We would stop them, whatever it took. The mercenaries believed their hardware made them invincible. What they did not know was that their every motion was already being counted. The storm was coming. If you were the commander, would you strike the convoy on the road or let it reach the compound so you could try to take the whole network at once? By 08:20 a.m., the convoy rolled through the gate of its sanctuary, a sprawling stronghold dug into the desert just 7 miles from El Paso's neighborhoods. Outwardly it resembled a maze of warehouses. In reality, it was a fortress, tall steel walls topped with layers of razor wire and ringed by heavy emplacements. Outward-facing sentries and overlapping fields of fire. Over 200 armed guards patrolled the perimeter, weapons trained outward like talons. Inside those walls lay a grim reality. Intelligence confirmed more than 100 hostages, women and children taken from border settlements. Some were days from being sold into trafficking networks, others were held in appalling conditions. The site was more than a cartel outpost. It was a factory of human suffering mere miles from homes. If the convoy's cargo and cash reached that compound, the place could be transformed into an impenetrable hub of criminal industry. For U.S. commanders, one rule was absolute: heavy bombardment was unacceptable. A single large explosion risked turning the site into a slaughterhouse. The only viable option was precision, restraint, and coordinated ground action, special tactics teams on the ground with drones supporting from above. Then, at 08:27, a reconnaissance drone crept too near enemy sensors and an alarm sounded. If detection spread, the entire operation, scores of drones and hundreds of operators in position, could be exposed. At the last moment, electronic warfare specialists flooded the area with jamming and false echoes. To the mercenaries, the drone vanished like smoke. the compound's silhouette blurred. The convoy was inside. The hostages were inside. The chemicals were inside. There could be no retreat. The trap was set and the strike would come from within. A hush fell over commanders as they counted every risk. By 08:45 a.m., the battlefield had been drawn. Inside the walls sat the convoy, dozens of armored trucks, over 1,000 chemical drums, and a mercenary force swelled by reinforcements to nearly a few hundred fighters. Their confidence was absolute. Steel walls, heavy guns, and human shields, they believed, made them untouchable. But the operation was already in motion. Hidden just beyond the perimeter, hundreds of naval assault teams lay in wait, divided into sharp, focus cells, elements tasked to breach and secure the hostage areas, precision marksmen on overwatch, and multiple strike units staged for close quarters fighting. Beneath the surface, divers and engineers had mapped drainage channels, preparing alternate entries if conventional breaches failed. Overhead, the sky was alive with micro-drones, each the size of a pack, circling at low altitude. Their omnidirectional sensors relayed the compound's pulse to the command node. Each carried a small precision charge, sufficient to neutralize emplacements without wholesale destruction. Collectively, their payload was measured as a series of distributed charges across the sky. The plan was surgical. At a scheduled moment, a contingent of drones would strike the western perimeter to draw defenders, while breach teams hit the eastern wall and raced toward the detention blocks. Marksmen would engage exposed gunners quickly, while other drones hunted heavy emplacements in the courtyard. Every movement was timed. Every operator knew his sector, fallback point, and rescue corridor. The mercenaries thought their fortress secure. In truth, the site had become a chessboard and the initiative had shifted away from them. Are you still there? Don't go. Come with me into the heart of the action. At 09:15 a.m. the desert erupted. From a few hundred feet above, the first wave of micro-drones dove like hornets, each delivering a compact precision charge, and within moments breaches opened along the western wall in a cascade of controlled detonations. One drone struck a guard tower, suppressing a heavy piece of hardware with a thunderous concussion. Another hit a munitions shed, triggering a series of secondary explosions. Panic rippled through the defenders. Scores of fighters sprinted toward the west wall, firing into smoke and shadow. Exactly as the planners had anticipated, while their attention fixed westward, the main effort struck in the east. At 09:17, naval assault teams breached the wall using thermal cutting charges designed to defeat hardened barriers. Compact weapons barked in short surgical bursts. In the opening minutes, over a half-dozen guards fell before they could sound an organized alarm. Operators advanced in disciplined squads, clearing corridors with stun devices and breaching tools. A second wave of drones targeted heavy nests and gun positions. Within minutes, several major defensive positions were neutralized. One strike hit a fuel cache, producing a towering fireball visible from several miles away. By 09:20, Overwatch marksmen joined the action. From rooftops and ridgelines, sniper teams engaged exposed gunners with icy precision. In minutes, dozens of fighters were downed by precise fire. Inside, the fight turned to close quarters. Near the central barracks, a squad exchanged heavy volumes of fire with entrenched defenders. Several Americans were wounded, shoulder, thigh, forearm, but none relented. They pushed forward, grenades and breaching rounds opening kill zones until the last hardened defender was suppressed. By 09:25, the compound burned on multiple fronts. Men who had swaggered moments before now scattered. Communications faltered, heavy weapons lay ruined. The drone attacks had executed dozens of precision strikes in a short span, each collapsing a piece of the compound's defensive web. And yet the mission was only half done. Deep inside, more than 100 hostages remained behind locked doors. Desperate guards dragged civilians toward firing lines, attempting to use them as shields. For the assault teams, this was the knife's edge, the instant where victory or disaster could be decided. At 09:27, the final order cut through the static. All teams pushed to the hostage cells. No hesitation. The storm had only just begun. By 09:30 a.m., the battle reached its most critical phase. The assault teams pivoted toward the detention warehouses, 4 massive buildings repurposed as prisons. Intelligence warned that more than 100 civilians were chained inside, many of them women and children. Guards had threats to execute captives if the base fell. Every second mattered. Team Bravo led the initial entry. 12 operators forced the eastern warehouse doors with carefully calculated charges small enough to avoid injuring those inside. The concussive blasts stunned guards but spared civilians. Within 40 seconds, half-dozen mercenaries were taken down by precision shots. Rifles clattered to the floor before a single captive was harmed. By 09:33, the first 60 plus hostages were freed, shaken but alive. In the central compound, resistance hardened. Nearly 70 fighters dug in along concrete corridors toward the second warehouse, opening with belt-fed weapons and pouring sustained fire. The air filled with smoke, sparks and ricochet. Yet the assault teams pressed on with tactical discipline. Fragmentation devices and coordinated clearing techniques opened access to kill zones as the rescue push continued. The rewritten account emphasizes rescue and restraint, focusing on the human cost and the difficult choices commanders faced. The rewritten account emphasizes rescue and restraint, focusing on the human cost and the difficult choices commanders faced. The rewritten account emphasizes rescue and restraint, focusing on the human cost and the difficult choices commanders faced. The rewritten account emphasizes rescue and restraint, focusing on the human cost and the difficult choices commanders faced.